Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast episode number 647 for the 7th of March 2021. Richard Saunders coming to you from what looks like to be a warm and sunny Sydney, Australia, and my spies in Oregon tell me it's snowing. I'm sure you needed to know that. My other spies in Victoria tell me it's hot. I'm sure you needed to know that too. Good day for the beach, a good day for coffee with friends, I think. I wonder what the temperature is like in Canada, because at the top of the show we have a new segment. You Can Count on Adrian with Adrian Hill. Adrian Hill from Canada is a math teacher, and she's going to be starting a new series about myths concerned with numbers and mathematics. Today she's going to be looking at the myth or the saying or the idea that bad things happen in threes, come along in threes. Two bad things have happened, just wait, there'll be another one, something like that. Do bad things really happen in threes? With Adrian Hill coming up at the top of the show. And we give a big shout out to our friend in the United States, Jennifer Hathorn, who was really the inspiration and helped with this story enormously. Thank you, Jennifer. Following that, it's a news item about the fears and concerns that authorities have about the vaccine deniers in this country, the good old anti-vaxxers, and the possible action they could take against the rollout of vaccines against COVID-19 here in Australia. Following that, it's the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham, and this week Tim looks at planets, days, dates, and death. And this is the final of the Book of Tim for the moment. I'll have to encourage Tim to come back to the Skeptic Zone studios and record some more. I can usually encourage him over with an offer of a lunch. We'll see what we can do. Then to round off this week's show, it's the final Into the Unknown in our Trove segment. The final wrapping up, the final summing up of the committee looking into paranormal claims from 1949 reported in 1950 in the UK. A slightly shorter than average show this week, but I hope you'll enjoy it nevertheless. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have some peanuts, because I can. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. You Can Count on Adrian with Adrian Hill.
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be looking at the myth that bad things happen or come along in threes. This myth is widespread, even if some people don't think too deeply about it. But I think we can explore just why this myth came to be, and also why it seems to come true from time to time. Before I get into this myth, please keep in the back of your mind that we humans have evolved to be pattern-seeking, storytelling animals. We have the ability to imagine. Let's look at some of the psychology about this bad things myth. I think you'll see how easy it is for people to come to believe there might be something in it. Even something mystical. Bad things happen every day. Can we put them into some sort of scale of badness? How bad does a bad thing have to be before it's a very bad thing? Did you run out of coffee this morning? Was that a bad thing? It's not so bad in the scheme of things, although maybe some of my friends would disagree. Would you include that in a possible list of bad things that might happen in threes? Maybe in your own day-to-day life you might, but I don't think you would in a wider sense, as this myth seems to rely on more dramatic occurrences that come to the notice of many people, not just you. So, one day, a bad thing happens that comes to your attention and to the notice of many others. Maybe someone famous and much loved dies unexpectedly. not an everyday event, but it does happen from time to time. You note it, and you might be saddened, or maybe not, but you do acknowledge it. Then not long after, maybe within a week, someone else famous and much loved also dies. You, and depending on who it is, thousands or millions of people hear about it. The first death a few days ago might even cross your mind. But some people at this point will start waiting and looking for the next bad event to happen. Who is next? They might say. They already think bad things happen in threes, so they are primed for the next possible event. Say within a week or a bit longer, the death of another famous person hits the news. Some interesting things now start to happen. You may well hear in the media or in conversations with friends that bad things happen in threes. And as 3 bad things just happened, it seems that this is true. It's a validation of the saying. One bad thing happening on its own is not significant, as bad things happen regularly. 2 bad things happening close in time to each other might get your attention, but 3 bad things is something more significant. What is so special about the number 3? 1, 2, 3, ABC, win, lose, draw, grandma, mother, daughter, tic-tac-toe, the 3 little pigs of fable, and the list goes on. 3 is a simple number associated with many things. It's one of the first numbers we learned as children and comes up repeatedly. What's not to like about 3? In our example, we use the news of the death of famous people happening 3 times within a relatively short period. But of course this myth thrives on the fact that there is a wide definition of bad things and bad news. So let's swap out the first or second or even third celebrity death and replace it with, say, a train accident, an explosion, a natural disaster, anything. Someone is bound to link the 3 events together and the myth is repeated. We might have an earthquake one week, a famous death the next, then you name it the week after. Why then is there no saying along the lines of bad things happen in 4s or even bad things happen in 5s? For this myth, 3 seems to be the magic number, and it is time dependent. We don't stretch it out over months or years. When you think about it, the likelihood of one bad thing happening is obvious. As we have noted, bad things happen all the time, depending on what we collectively decide is a bad thing. The likelihood of 2 bad things happening close together is a little less, but not out of the question, and we might not think anything of it. Then we come to 3 in a row, and the likelihood of this happening is far less than just 2. So what about 4 or 5 bad things? Far less of a chance of hearing about bad things happening in these numbers. It does happen to be sure, but it's uncommon. So uncommon, in fact, that we have not found a need to weave a saying around it or looked for, as some people do, some sort of mystical meaning. So many little rabbit holes now come into play with this myth in general. What if you, for whatever reason, didn't hear about the first bad event in the series of 3? What if then there are 4 bad events, but you count number 4 as only number 3 in the series? Can it be said that for you the bad events still happened in 3s? What if 4 bad things happened, but you sort of reset the counter after number 3 so that number 4 is now only number 1 in a new series? There are endless thought experiments and ways of looking at this myth. Now, remember how at the start I said that we humans are pattern-seeking, storytelling animals? This is called, as far as pattern-seeking goes, Apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. It was first described by German psychologist and neuroscientist Klaus Conrad in 1958. So with bad things happening in 3s, we have a perceived pattern and an easy one for our brains to recognize. Then comes the story, reinforced by the saying, bad things happen in 3s. For some, maybe many, the story involves magical or superstitious thinking. These 3 events must somehow be linked by some sort of force, or maybe even a god, or the idea of karma, or something. How can they just happen like this? Part of us needs to find a reason, as dealing with the random nature of significant events somehow does not sit well with us. Pattern seeking and storytelling using imagination have served us well for countless millennia. These aspects of our brain helped our ancient ancestors to survive and are part of what makes us human. We should acknowledge and value them, but just be aware that sometimes they can sidetrack us from reality. Ever wonder why we never hear that good things happen in threes? It's possibly due to bad news and bad events being more important to us in kind of a way. The realization of danger was very important to our ancient ancestors. It was vital to their survival. Also, we have the more modern sayings of bad news travels fast or bad news sells newspapers. We remember bad things as they tend to make a bigger impact on us. Yes, bad things can and do happen in threes, but it is us with our brains full of imagination that adds the extra meaning.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you can listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Now here's a news item that caught my attention during the week, published at news.com.au by Sarah Sharples on February the 28th. COVID-19 vaccine rollout, anti-vaxxer disruption concerns as police make watch list. Police are making a list of anti-vaccination protesters after concerns that they could target storage facilities and destroy vaccines. A specialist team of detectives from the Australian Federal Police is compiling a list of anti-vaccination protesters after concerns that vaccination centres and storage facilities could be targeted. As a result, vaccine storage locations are being kept a secret due to security concerns. Quote, "Everybody is concerned about this. We don't want them destroying vials of vaccine," a law enforcement source told the Herald Sun. They will also be ready to attend any major security breach involving the vaccine. There are serious fears from senior government figures and law enforcement that protesters could disrupt the rollout of the vaccine as the government aims to have every Australian vaccinated by October, reported in the Herald Sun. A joint intelligence group made of members of the AFP, that's Australian Federal Police, Australian Security Intelligence Information, Australian Border Force and State Police Forces, has also been set up by the Department of Home Affairs. It will be staffed around the clock and act as a central hub for information on the anti-vaccination movement and vaccine security. The AFP warned there is an increasing risk of violence from the anti-vaccination movement in a submission last week to a government inquiry into extremist movements and radicalism in Australia. Quote, "Law enforcement experiences in 2020 identified an emerging trend of online extremists exploiting the increased public fear, isolation, unemployment, family stress, and financial hardship associated with the COVID-19 pandemic," end quote, it said. About 200 people attended a rally on Saturday, that would be the previous Saturday, against the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine at Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt's office in Victoria. Now, while I don't think there will be anything like attacks on vaccine centres and things like that, we can't rule that out because these people are zealots, extremists, and they're on a crusade. And once a group of people consider themselves to be on a crusade, well, every precaution should be taken. Again, that comes to us from news.com.au by Sarah Sharples.
Allora ciao, io mi chiamo Professore Dave, io ti voglio insegnare tutte le cose sulla scienza. Parliamo di fisica, di chimica, biologia, astronomia, matematica e tante altre cose. Guardami su YouTube, arrivederci. Hey everyone, this is Professor Dave. I want to teach you about all kinds of things regarding science. I want to tell you about physics. I want to tell you about chemistry, biology, astronomy, math, and many, many more things. Come check me out on YouTube. The channel is called Professor Dave Explains. Take it easy.
He knows a lot about the science stuff. Professor Dave explains.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, my name is Tim Mendham. I'm the Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics and editor of our magazine, The Skeptic, which you can download off our website, skeptics.com.au. Today I'm reading from the What Goes Around column, which is the idea that you start off with one particular fact and you can work your way all the way around through various connections and end up where you started from. And this one we're looking at planets, days, dates and death. And it comes from the Skeptic magazine, March 2016, which is volume 36, number 1. On the 20th of January 2016, researchers Konstantin Batygin and Michael E. Brown at Caltech, which is California Technology, announced calculation-based evidence of a massive ninth planet in the solar system. Now, don't forget that Pluto stopped being a planet, so there was a vacancy. The predicted planet would have an estimated mass of about 10 times that of Earth, a highly elliptical orbit, and could take 15,000 years to orbit the Sun. The existence of the so-called Planet 9 is still hypothetical, but its presence would explain the unusual orbital configuration of a group of trans-Neptunian objects that orbit mostly beyond the Kuiper belt, which is way out there. In their paper, Batygin and Brown simply referred to the object as Perturber, and only in later press releases did they use the nickname Planet 9. It will not be officially named until its existence has been confirmed with images. Planet 9 is not the only planet with naming issues. When Hanover-born William Herschel, along with his sister Caroline, moved to England and started their astronomical studies, he came under the patronage of a fellow Hanoverian, the Elector, who happened to also be King George III of Britain. In 1781, when Herschel discovered a new planet beyond the orbit of Saturn, his first thought was to name it Georgium Sidus, which means George's star, after his patron. Understandably, this was not supported by various foreign astronomers, and presumably by citizens of the newly independent USA, who were not all that fond of George III, and it was almost 70 years before the name Uranus was proposed, a name of a planet that you have trouble pronouncing any which way you can. But never mind, we'll call it Uranus. William Herschel's son, Sir John Frederick William Herschel, who was the first baronet, was an English polymath, mathematician, astronomer, chemist, inventor, and experimental photographer, who also did valuable botanical work, what you call a Renaissance man. He named 7 moons of Saturn and 4 moons of Uranus. He made many contributions to the science of photography and investigated colour blindness and the chemical power of ultraviolet rays. His preliminary discourse in 1831, which advocated an inductive approach to scientific experiment and theory building, was an important contribution to the philosophy of science, and he originated the use of the Julian day system in astronomy. The Julian day is the continuous count of days since the beginning of the Julian period, used primarily by astronomers. Outside of astronomy, the term Julian date may also refer to the date-of-year, day of year number, more properly the ordinal date, in the Gregorian calendar. The most widely used civil calendar, it was named for Pope Gregory the 13th, who introduced it in 1582. This was a refinement of the earlier Julian calendar, which, due to inadequate calculations of the length of the year, was falling out of sync with reality. Now, that was named after Julius Caesar, so you can see it was a long, long time ago. The motivation for the change was to bring the date for the celebration of Easter to the time of year in which it was celebrated when it was introduced by the early church. When the new Gregorian calendar was put in use, the difference was corrected by the deletion of 10 days. They actually disappeared. The Julian calendar day, Thursday, the 4th of October 1582, was followed by the first day of the Gregorian calendar, Friday, the 15th of October 1582, which would be bad if you happened to be born in between those days because you didn't have a birthday. The reform was adopted initially by the Catholic countries of Europe, but many Protestant countries feared the new calendar was part of a plot to return them to the Catholic fold. Britain and the British Empire, including the eastern part of what is now the United States, adopted the Gregorian calendar in 1752. That's almost 200 years later. And they were followed by Sweden in 1753. The last European country to adopt the reform was Greece in 1923. Despite the artificial nature of any calendar, dating systems have led to fears of conspiracy and disaster. The phantom time hypothesis is a conspiracy theory advanced by German historian and publisher Herbert Illig, who was born in 1947, which proposes that the Anno Domini dating system was fabricated, adding in a period of phantom time in the early Middle Ages from AD 614 to 911, which either occurred in a different period or did not occur at all. Another dodgy issue for dates is the end of the world on December 21, 2012, as calculated in the Mayan calendar. One suggested scenario for the end was a planet colliding with Earth. The planet, called Nibiru, is the supposed but debunked Planet X. However, with the demotion of Pluto in 2016, this world should now be called Planet 9. And that's the name of the planet they discovered in 2016, supposedly. And that's the What Goes Around column from The Skeptic, March 2016, volume 36, number 1, which you can download from the Skeptic's website, skeptics.com.au, for free. Then again, you might like to subscribe to the magazine and get all this great information before I tell you about it.
Hi, this is Dr. Pamela Gay from Astronomy Cast. Each week, Fraser Kane and I take our listeners on a fact-based journey through the cosmos. With our weekly podcast, we explain not just what we know, but how we know what we know about this universe that we share. Check us out at astronomycast.com and look for us in iTunes, Google Play, and wherever you download podcasts. See you online.
Now, after all these weeks, after something like 10 weeks, it's time to wrap up our series Into the Unknown from the Trove Archives. This has been an investigation conducted in 1949, reported on in 1950. As you will recall, the panel of experts way back then were investigating many so-called mystics and clairvoyants and spiritualists and so on. The encounters reported in our series concerned people who claim to what we would call channel disembodied spirits and heal. And over the last couple of weeks we've heard the summing up of some of the panel members. This week we conclude with the summing up from Canon Knight and L.A.G. Strong. And it says at the top of the page here, which happens to be page number 5 in the colour supplement, published on the 8th of October. Spiritualism, a fact or fake? Experts tell of their investigation. So let's pick it up now with Canon Night. There is a great deal more to be discovered about the mind in man, and the way in which mind speaks to mind. We are not entirely shut into the methods of the five senses. There are people who can, with some accuracy, with some error, read the minds of others. They know what is in some other person's mind when that other person has told them nothing. They may be able to bridge distance and know of an event which has happened far away. Many long-married people know the experience when one partner refers to a subject and the other says, "It's funny you should mention that. I was just thinking about that too." How often does one receive a letter from a distant friend which crosses one which has been just written to him? Each was thinking of the other, and each was led to write. Finally, what are we to say about the possibility that the dead are communicating with us? The Christian is fully convinced that he is surrounded with a great cloud of witnesses, and that he and they are bound together by mutual love, although sundered by death. He believes that they are near him and with him, and that they still love and help him. Only a weak faith could ask for more. And I'll chime in here and say, if I had that mythical time machine, I could go back and have a word to Canon Night about what Brian Dunning calls the law of very large numbers, or remembering the hits and forgetting the misses, or confirmation bias, where he talks about things like how often do you mention something and your partner says, "I was just thinking about that too," or letters that happened across in those days. Hardly remarkable events. And a more modern example we don't hear much about anymore is, "I was thinking about somebody and the phone rang and I picked it up and it was them." Let's read on. And it seems to me it is those who are weak in their faith who turn to spiritualism as a cult and choose it rather than the Christian religion. It is difficult to state precisely what happens when people say that the dead are speaking to them through a sensitive. In all recent sittings, one felt that there was no fact stated by the medium which was not already in the mind of the person who was addressed. And I'll break in once again. Now, throughout these reports, we've seen examples of the panel firmly convinced that telepathy is real. And they're just sort of really questioning spiritualism, which is bizarre. So every time something comes up which they can't quite explain, they will just write it off as, "Oh, he was reading my mind," or something like that. Let's read on. Scientifically rigid tests were not employed, so that if there was any artifice, it was impossible to prove it. It must be a terrific temptation to sensitives to produce some results, and the amount of fishing for names and information which goes on means that the sensitive can have no access to supernormal information. Let me break in once again. Oh, Canon Night, you suspect something like cold reading, where you say fishing for names and information, although you didn't have a term for it. Okay, let's continue. Whenever sensitives ventured on theological or religious territory, there was no sign at all that they had anything fresh to say, and in most cases what they said was puerile and feeble. It was all centered on the comfort and happiness of man rather than on the obligation of man to his Maker. The whole level was far below the tone and challenge of the Christian gospel. For my own part, I ended my course of contact with the mediums we saw with a less kindly view than I had when I began. Evidently, it is rather like vaccination. A little of it cures one of catching the whole thing. I felt that the evidences of psychic facts were interesting, and that there is much room for careful study of the phenomena, insofar as they help us to know more of human personality and may help to bridge some gaps, for example, as between science and Christianity. But I do not find any evidence of contact with departed spirits. I do not find that any so-called communications from the dead have in any way illuminated either my reason or my spirit. The fact that the sensitives have to abdicate their own personality in order to become channels for these communications offends my sense of dignity, of reason, and the honor due to individual souls. Thank you, Canon Knight, for that interesting summing up and almost stumbling upon the truth. However, it was also seen through the perspective of his particular religious opinions. And now finally we come to the summing up of L.A.G. Strong, who is listed here as novelist, essayist, and journalist. He is perhaps best known for his popular work in fiction and films. Strong is keenly interested in the spiritual, an interest which frequently finds expression in his writings. I believe that the dead can and do communicate with us. My faith is based on what I honestly believe to be my own experience, fortified immensely by the experience of people whom I trust. If certain things have not happened to me, then there is nothing in the whole universe of which I can be sure. But I can not accept the hypothesis that all phenomena coming within the domain of psychic research are the work of discarnate spirits, and that these phenomena therefore offer evidence of survival. Let me put the matter in the simplest, most personal terms. If I believe, because of a personal experience, that a dead friend has spoken to me, I do not go about asserting that this is so. Much less do I assert, on the basis of my experience, the general proposition that the dead speak to us. If you, in perplexity, distress, or grief, ask me man to man what I believe, I may well decide to tell you, but I cannot assert that what I believe to have happened to me is a scientific fact. I cannot ask anyone to accept survival and communication as facts, because I say they are. I can merely say that I believe these things to be true, and give my reasons. But, says the convinced spiritualist, if you believe these things to be true, why do you doubt our evidence of their truth? Why do you bother to scrutinize it? Why do you go out of your way to explain it by telepathy, clairvoyance, and so forth? Why do you fight against us? To this, I have several replies. The first and most important is that no scrutiny can ever hurt the truth. What is truth will stand, no matter who investigates it. The second is that by offering as evidence of survival a whole host of happenings that are vulnerable to scrutiny and can be explained, and even in some cases imitated, on lines that do not transcend known laws, the spiritualists delay the acceptance of the very truth they proclaim, and so involuntarily become its worst opponents. It is because I believe in survival and in the power of discarnate spirits to make contact with those still on earth that I examine to the best of my ability everything which comes my way that seems to bear upon these matters. The interrogation of faith and reason is perhaps the main task of those who have been endowed with the capacity to think and to believe. We are charged to make sense of all our experience. Our temptation is to make sense only of a part, or, more deadly still, to exclude or deny what will not fit into our scheme. The Apostle Thomas was not a skeptic. Let me break in here. I had a colleague once who said in public meetings that, of course, the skeptics believe in biblical things. After all, St. Thomas is our patron saint, and half the audience would get it and half wouldn't. The Apostle Thomas was not a skeptic. We read on. The Apostle Thomas was not a skeptic. He was going to spend the rest of his life in telling people that a thing had happened and, for their sake, as well as to his own, he wanted evidence. The few seances which I attended offered considerable evidence of telepathy and clairvoyance, but none, that I could see, of survival or of the work of spirits. My conclusion was that the mediums whom I saw were honest in their belief that what they said was given to them by discarnate spirits. They themselves did not seem at any point conclusively to originate what they had said, but there was no evidence of outside agency. Nothing was said that could not have been picked up by ordinary telepathy or clairvoyance. The end. What a marathon effort, my dear listeners. You've stuck with this fascinating report from the 1950s over the last 10 weeks. And there, I think, in the final paragraph from L.A.G. Strong, really sums up the attitude of the investigating panel. Now, they investigated many instances of seances and other things that we don't have access to. There was only selective cases reported here during the course of the last 10 weeks. But that final paragraph and the final line really sums up the mindset of those people conducting the investigations. Nothing was said that could not have been picked up by ordinary telepathy or clairvoyance. Now, if you conduct an investigation into matters of the paranormal and the supernatural with that mindset, it's not really going to be very helpful. Now, of course, the criticism labeled at skeptics like me who conduct investigations is that we go in with a particular mindset that is of, this doesn't work, I'm going to prove it doesn't work, or something like that. And the answer to that, which I've given many times over the years in press interviews and whatever, is that of course I've got my preconceived notions, everybody does, and after 20 years of these investigations myself and 50 plus years generally in the skeptical community, and there's been no results, of course we've got preconceived notions, but it doesn't mean that we don't go into investigations with an open mind and give the claimant or the person making the claims every opportunity, fair chance to show what they say they can do, they can actually do. And that was Into the Unknown, a long series of reports and comments from the investigating panel way back in 1950, published in the Colour magazine Sunday Sun supplement. And I will link to this particular part in this week's show notes so you can read the conclusion for yourself. And next week in the Trove segment, we will be looking at biorhythms. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone and those new people coming on board at skepticzone.tv with Patreon or PayPal. In fact, I just got my monthly payment from Patreon a few days ago, which was very timely because it helped cover some vital costs. So thank you to those people. And if you want to become a supporter of the show, if you enjoy listening to the show every week, I enjoy doing it, and so do the team of reporters. Just head for skepticzone.tv and click the links. And as Maynard reminded us in this week's episode, while you're there, you can click the links for the YouTube versions of the show, including the Logical Fallacy segment with Michelle Bickersma and the Typewriter Time funny sketches with me and lots of other skeptics. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from sunny Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter @Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to the afterthoughts, the people who keep listening after the music. And if you don't know what all this is about, this is where I play the dice game. I'll roll a d6 this week 3 times, and you use whatever power you like. I know, a surefire way. What you do is you listen to this segment, rewind and listen to it again, then you're sure to get every number correct. I'm going to roll this 3 times, and maybe 4, who knows. And you see how many you can get right. A d6, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 in my dice rolling box here. First number coming up, here it comes. 4. Oh, it sort of was spinning around in the box there. First number is 4 this week. Okay. Next number. Do you have one? Here it comes. 2. Write that down. And the third number, last number for this week, well, the last in the series of 3, there might be another one, is 6. All the evens this week. 4, 2, and 6 with the supplementary number. This is where if you get the supplementary number and 2 correct numbers, you get you get to listen to the show again next week. I don't know. Here we go, the last one. 5. So the numbers this week to recap: 4, 2, 6, and 5. And another plane. And birds. And who knows what.